Thug grabs the royal guard's arm to prove his strength, instantly learns who's stronger. The sun had barely risen over the kingdom, and yet the streets near the royal palace were already full of life. Merchants were setting up their stalls, spreading colorful cloths and fruits in neat piles. The smell of fresh bread and baked goods drifted through the air, mingling with the scents of spices and herbs. Children ran around laughing, chasing each other while their parents spoke in low voices, discussing daily life and the news from faraway villages. Guards in polished armor patrolled calmly, walking in a rhythm that spoke of years of training. They were always alert, watching for troublemakers, yet they did so without disturbing the calm rhythm of the busy morning. Among the crowd, a figure moved with a different energy. A young man, rough in appearance, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, walked along the cobbled streets. His boots clinked against the stones as he stepped forward, scanning the crowd with sharp eyes. He was known in the town, not for kindness or skill, but for his reckless strength and his need to prove himself wherever he went. Wherever he appeared, whispers followed him. Some feared him, some avoided him, and a few, bold or foolish, dared to challenge him. But he had never yet met anyone who could match his strength, or so he thought. That morning, he had a goal. He wanted to show the townspeople just how strong he was. He wanted to display something that would leave everyone watching in awe and admiration. And as he moved closer to the palace gates, his eyes fell on a royal guard. The guard was tall and solid, wearing the heavy armor of the kingdom, a sword at his side and a shield slung across his back. He walked with calm confidence, his steps careful but steady. To anyone else, he might have looked like just another figure in the morning crowd. But the thug saw a challenge, a perfect opportunity to prove his strength. The crowd seemed to sense that something unusual was about to happen. The air, once filled with chatter and laughter, grew tense as people glanced at the thug and then at the guard. Birds that had been singing in the trees grew silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Children stopped running and merchants paused their work, sensing that a spectacle was about to unfold. The thug's heart beat faster and his grin widened. He believed that no one could resist him, and he wanted the world to see it. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward and grabbed the royal guard's arm. The motion was quick, almost too fast for the eye to follow. The thug flexed his muscles, feeling the power in his own body as he tried to lift or pull the guard in a show of dominance. The crowd gasped, a mixture of excitement and fear rippling through the onlookers. Some whispered to each other, unsure of what they were witnessing, while others leaned forward, eager to see who would win this sudden contest. At first, the thug felt a surge of pride. His muscles strained, and he felt as if he could move the guard with sheer force. He pulled harder, imagining the cheers of the crowd, imagining that the guard would be forced to submit, that the people would finally see who was stronger. His mind raced with thoughts of fame and fearlessness, believing that this moment would be remembered as the day he had dominated a royal guard. But then, something unexpected happened. The royal guard did not move, not an inch. His body was solid, his stance firm. The armor clinked slightly as he shifted his weight, but otherwise he remained perfectly steady. The thug's confidence began to waver. He pulled harder, trying different angles, but the guard's arm held firm, as though it were made of stone. The thug's muscles burned, and sweat began to form on his forehead. The strength that had carried him through countless smaller fights suddenly seemed small and weak compared to the calm, unshakable power of the guard. The crowd was silent now, everyone watching in awe. Even the birds seemed to have forgotten to sing, and the street noises had dimmed. Eyes widened as people realized that this was no ordinary man. The thug's struggle became obvious, his effort visible in every muscle. His grin faded slightly as panic started to creep into his mind. For the first time, he realized that he might have misjudged the situation. The guard did not flinch, did not shout, did not even raise an eyebrow. It was as if the guard knew something the thug did not. Raw strength alone could not win this contest. The thug's arms trembled as he continued to pull, feeling a mixture of frustration and disbelief. He could not understand it. He had always believed that strength was the ultimate measure of power. Every fight he had fought before had proven that belief. But here, facing this single royal guard, that belief began to crumble. His muscles burned, his confidence faltered, and he felt a strange new feeling, fear. Not the fear of pain, but the fear of realizing that he was not the strongest, that someone else was more powerful, more disciplined, more in control. The royal guard's calm presence only intensified the lesson. He did not speak, did not make a move, and yet he was clearly in command. The crowd could feel it too. Whispers spread like wildfire among the townspeople. "Look at him," one merchant murmured. "He doesn't even need to try." Children looked with wide eyes, some hiding behind their parents, others fascinated by the display. The thug, meanwhile, felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation, every silent judgment pressing down on him. He realized he had stepped into a situation far beyond what he had imagined. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt longer, every movement heavier. The thug's initial arrogance had disappeared, replaced by something else entirely. Humility, confusion, and a deep, unexpected respect for the man he had challenged. His breath came faster and his face was flushed, but he could not deny the truth that stared him in the eyes. He was outmatched. In that quiet, tense moment, the thug's mind raced. He thought of all the times he had boasted about his strength, of all the people he had intimidated, and of all the lessons he had ignored. And now, for the first time, he was being forced to confront a simple but powerful truth. Strength without discipline, without experience, without skill, could not overcome true mastery. The royal guard, sensing the thug's struggle and the lessons that needed to be learned, stood silently. His calm eyes met the thug's, and there was no anger there, no harshness, only a quiet, steady authority. The crowd could see it clearly. This was a man who had trained for years, who had learned patience and control, who understood the true meaning of strength. The contrast between the two men could not have been clearer. One fueled by raw power and pride, the other guided by skill, training, and discipline. As the thug's energy began to wane, his muscles burning and his confidence faltering, the crowd began to whisper in anticipation. They wondered what would happen next. Would the thug finally give up? Would he learn the lesson that had been staring him in the face from the moment he grabbed the guard's arm? Every onlooker could feel the tension building, the silent question hanging in the air. Who truly was stronger? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the thug's arms shook one last time. His pride, his arrogance, his desire to impress the crowd, all of it faltered. He realized that this contest was not about winning or losing, but about understanding the limits of his own strength and the value of skill and discipline. Slowly, reluctantly, he released the guard's arm. There was a collective sigh from the crowd, a mixture of relief, admiration, and respect. The thug stepped back, breathing heavily, his face red from effort and embarrassment. He felt a strange mix of emotions, disappointment, yes, but also a sense of awe. He had been forced to confront something he had never faced before, a man stronger than himself in every meaningful way. The royal guard, still calm and steady, gave a small nod, acknowledging that the lesson had been learned, though not with anger or cruelty, but with quiet understanding. As the crowd slowly resumed its normal rhythm, the thug remained for a moment, reflecting on what had just happened. The merchants returned to their work, the children to their games, and the birds began to sing again. Yet the memory of that encounter stayed with everyone who had witnessed it. It was more than just a display of strength. It was a lesson in humility, discipline, and respect. For the thug, it was a beginning. A beginning of understanding that real strength was not measured by muscle alone, but by control, skill, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to step back. That morning, in the busy streets near the royal palace, a young man's perspective began to change, and a lesson that would stay with him for a lifetime was quietly taught in front of an astonished crowd. The thug stood a few steps away from the royal guard, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to catch his breath. His muscles still ached from the sudden effort, and his pride was bruised in a way he had never experienced before. He stared at the guard, searching for a hint of anger or mockery, expecting some kind of punishment. But the guard remained calm, his posture steady, his eyes clear and focused. The air between them was filled with tension, but it was a quiet tension, one that did not erupt into violence or shouting. Instead, it seemed to carry a lesson waiting to be learned if the thug was willing to understand. Around them, the crowd had not dispersed. Merchants had stopped arranging their goods, children had paused their play, and townspeople leaned closer, their curiosity unbroken. Whispers ran through the crowd like a gentle current. "Did you see that? The thug couldn't move him at all." one person murmured. He tried with all his strength, and yet the guard didn't even flinch, said another. Eyes darted between the two men, sensing that something more than physical strength was being displayed. The royal guard's calmness seemed to shine even brighter against the thug's restless energy. The thug's mind was a storm. He had always believed that strength alone could command respect. In the past, he had bullied others, grabbed things that were not his, and won small fights simply because he could overpower his opponents. But now, facing this guard, he felt something entirely new: confusion. He had always measured strength by visible effort, flexed muscles, clenched fists, loud threats. But here, none of that seemed to matter. The guard's presence was quiet but overwhelming. His control, his balance, his patience. It was as if his strength was not just in his arms or chest, but in his mind and discipline as well. The thug's hands twitched, almost reaching out again to test the guard's strength, but he stopped himself. There was a strange realization building inside him. This was not a contest that could be won by brute force. The guard did not react to his challenge in the way anyone else might have. He did not respond with anger, nor did he try to assert dominance. Instead, he exuded a calm power that made it clear that true strength was not measured by struggle or aggression. The thug felt a pang of humility, the first real humility of his life. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to regain some sense of control. Sweat ran down his forehead, and his heart pounded in his chest. The crowd's attention made it feel like the world had narrowed to this single moment. Every movement, every expression was magnified. He wanted to say something, to explain his actions, to claim that he had only meant to show off and not cause trouble. But the words felt hollow. The moment demanded more than excuses, it demanded understanding. The royal guard finally spoke, his voice calm, clear, and measured. Strength is not just the power in your arms. It is patience, control, and understanding when to use it, he said. His tone carried no anger, only quiet authority, as if he were teaching a lesson to someone who had yet to learn it. The thug blinked, unsure how to respond. These were not the words of someone threatening him. They were words meant to guide, to show him the difference between raw force and true power. The crowd listened intently, hanging on every word. Some nodded quietly, understanding the meaning behind the guard's calm speech. Children tilted their heads, trying to comprehend what was happening. Merchants leaned on their counters, watching the interaction as if it were a lesson for everyone. The thug, meanwhile, felt a strange mix of emotions: embarrassment, awe, and a growing curiosity. He had always sought recognition through physical might, but now he wondered if there was another way to gain respect, a way that required more than just strength. As the thug's thoughts raced, he realized he had underestimated the guard entirely. It was not just that the guard was strong, it was that he was trained, disciplined, and experienced. Years of practice, years of learning control over every movement, every muscle, every decision. The thug had relied on raw power, on instinct, on the confidence that he could overcome anyone. But instinct alone could not match experience and discipline. The lesson hit him hard. He had been reckless, and his pride had blinded him to the reality of the world outside his small circle of past victories. The royal guard continued to stand calmly, allowing the thug time to absorb the lesson. He did not press, did not push, and did not gloat. The guard's presence alone was enough to make the point. The thug's chest rose and fell as he tried to calm himself, his mind replaying every moment of the struggle. Each second of that brief confrontation was etched in his memory: the feel of the guard's arm, unyielding and steady, the strain of his own muscles, the collective gaze of the crowd. All of it created a powerful realization. He was not as strong as he thought, and he had much to learn. The crowd remained a silent audience, understanding that this moment was about more than just physical strength. It was about respect, patience, and the quiet power of experience. Some whispered to each other about how different the guard seemed from other men, how controlled and confident he appeared. Others spoke of the thug, noting how his arrogance had been tempered by the encounter, how he seemed to shrink slightly under the weight of the lesson he had received. The contrast between the two men was striking, a lesson written in flesh and presence rather than words alone. The thug finally took a step back, breathing deeply, trying to regain composure. His pride was wounded, but there was also a strange sense of clarity. He realized that this encounter could be a turning point, a moment that might change how he viewed strength, authority, and respect. He looked at the royal guard again, noticing the calm determination in his eyes, the steady posture, and the quiet power that seemed to radiate from him. The thug understood, perhaps for the first time, that strength without control was fleeting, while strength with discipline endured. Time seemed to slow as he absorbed the lesson. Every sound of the busy street, the chatter, the footsteps, the clatter of carts, seemed distant compared to the focus on this single interaction. He thought of his past actions, of moments when he had relied solely on power to get what he wanted. A deep sense of humility settled over him. He had been reckless, impulsive, and proud, but now he saw the value of patience, careful thought, and learning from those more skilled than himself. The royal guard finally relaxed slightly, sensing that the thug had begun to understand. There was no need for further demonstration. The lesson had been taught. The thug's eyes softened, no longer filled with defiance, but with a mixture of respect and introspection. The crowd sensed the shift as well, murmuring quietly among themselves, sharing the understanding that this encounter had gone far beyond mere strength. It had become a lesson in life, discipline, and character. For the thug, the world had changed in a small but meaningful way. He realized that to earn respect, he would need more than power. He would need patience, understanding, and humility. The royal guard's quiet authority had left an impression that would not fade easily. Even as he prepared to leave the crowd behind, he carried the weight of the lesson, a reminder that true strength was measured in ways far deeper than muscle alone. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the busy streets of the kingdom, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Merchants resumed their work, children returned to play, and the townspeople continued with their daily routines. Yet in the midst of it all, the memory of the encounter lingered. The thug walked away, slower than before, his mind heavy with thought, but also filled with a newfound respect for the world beyond his previous understanding. The royal guard returned to his duties, calm and unwavering, leaving behind a quiet legacy of discipline and strength that would inspire anyone who had witnessed it. That day, the lesson of true strength was witnessed by all who were present. It was not a lesson shouted or forced, but one quietly demonstrated through calmness, skill, and patience. The thug, though initially seeking to prove his superiority, had found himself humbled, challenged, and awakened to a deeper understanding of the world. And in that realization, a small seed of change had been planted, a seed that would grow over time, guiding him toward a path of respect, wisdom, and true strength. The thug stood in the middle of the street, still trying to catch his breath, his pride bruised and his mind racing. He had expected a fight, a chance to show everyone that he was stronger than anyone else. But now, after facing the royal guard, he felt something completely different, a mix of confusion, respect, and a strange new humility. He looked at the guard, trying to read him, searching for any sign of anger, frustration, or weakness. But the guard's face remained calm, steady, and unreadable. There was no rush, no need to prove himself. The thug realized, slowly but clearly, that this was a man who had mastered not just strength, but control over his own body, mind, and presence. Around them, the crowd had grown silent. People had stopped moving, paused mid-step, and even the children who had been watching with wide eyes were still and attentive. The air was thick with anticipation, but it was different now. It was not the excitement of a fight, but the tension of witnessing a lesson unfold. Merchants leaned against their stalls, whispering to each other about what they had just seen. "Did you see how calm he was?" one said. "He didn't even need to try," replied another. The townspeople could sense the power in quiet confidence, something far more impressive than the loud displays they were used to seeing in the streets. The thug's face was red from effort and embarrassment. He had always relied on brute force, using his muscles and his confidence to push through any obstacle, but here none of it had worked. The royal guard had not moved an inch. He had not raised his voice. He had simply stood firm, unshaken, and in doing so, had revealed the limits of the thug's own understanding. The thug felt a strange, new feeling rising in him, a combination of awe and fear, not the kind of fear that comes from pain, but the fear that comes from realizing one's own limits. The guard's eyes remained on the thug, calm and steady. He said nothing at first, letting the thug absorb the lesson on his own. There was no need for words. The silent presence of the guard was enough. The thug shifted his weight from one foot to the other, uncertain, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in public before. He wanted to speak, to make an excuse, to regain some sense of pride, but his mouth felt dry. Words seemed pointless in the face of such quiet power. For the first time, he began to understand that strength alone was not enough to earn respect. The royal guard finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. "It is easy to think that strength is only measured by muscle and force," he said. "But true strength comes from control, patience, and understanding when to act. Power without wisdom can lead to mistakes and regret." The thug listened, hanging on to every word. He had never heard anything like this before. In his world, strength was visible, loud, and immediate. But here, the guard spoke of strength in a way that transcended the physical. It was a concept the thug had never considered, and yet it resonated deeply within him. The crowd listened as well, many nodding quietly. Some had seen similar displays of force in the past, but few had witnessed the combination of calm confidence and physical power that the royal guard showed. Parents looked down at their children, hoping that they would remember this lesson. Strength was not about showing off, but about knowing oneself and one's limits. Even the merchants, busy with their work, paused to reflect on the quiet demonstration of authority and control. The street, once filled with the ordinary noise of the morning, seemed suspended in time, focused entirely on the interaction between these two men. The thug's arms were still tense, his muscles sore from the previous struggle. He slowly released any remaining tension, lowering his gaze to the ground. Pride and arrogance, which had been his companions for so long, began to fade. In their place grew something new: humility. He had always thought that proving his strength would earn him respect, but now he understood that true respect was not demanded. It was earned, through discipline, patience, and understanding. The guard had not humiliated him with words or strikes. He had taught him through his example, showing the thug what real strength looked like. Time seemed to stretch as the thug reflected on the moment. He thought of the many times he had relied on brute force to get what he wanted. He remembered the people he had intimidated, the small victories he had celebrated, and the pride he had carried. All of it felt hollow now, shallow compared to the calm authority the royal guard displayed. The thug realized that his understanding of power had been limited. He had seen strength as something immediate, something loud and visible. But now he saw it as something deeper, something enduring. The royal guard took a step back, creating a small distance between them, but his gaze remained fixed on the thug. It was a gaze filled not with anger but with expectation. The thug understood that the guard was giving him a choice, to learn or to ignore the lesson and walk away as he had before. The crowd, sensing this moment, held their breath. They watched not just the thug's struggle with strength, but his struggle with himself. The streets were quiet, but the silence was full of meaning. The thug finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. I thought I was strong. I thought I could. I don't know." He trailed off, realizing that no words could fully explain his sudden awareness. The guard nodded slowly, acknowledging the thug's honesty. There was no mockery, no judgment, only understanding. The lesson was not about shame, but about awareness. The thug was beginning to see the value of recognizing one's limits, of respecting those who had trained, disciplined, and mastered themselves over time. Around them, the crowd's tension began to ease. Some people whispered quietly about how rare it was to see such humility in the face of power. Others noted the grace with which the guard handled the situation, teaching without striking, guiding without force. Children began to smile, sensing the change in the thug, while merchants returned to their work, quietly sharing what they had witnessed with customers. The street was alive again, but the memory of the moment lingered, a subtle lesson etched into everyone's mind. The thug looked at the royal guard one more time. There was a newfound respect in his eyes, replacing the arrogance that had once been there. He realized that strength was more than a physical measure. It was about patience, wisdom, and self-control. The guard's calm presence had shown him that power without discipline was nothing. The thug felt a stirring of curiosity and determination. Perhaps, he thought, there was a better way to live, a better way to be strong. For the first time in his life, the thug understood the difference between fear and respect. He had been used to people fearing him because of his brute strength, but now he saw the value in being respected for something deeper. He felt a quiet determination rise within him, a desire to learn, to grow, to earn respect rather than demand it. The streets, which had seemed familiar and ordinary, now felt like a place full of possibilities and lessons. The royal guard stepped aside, allowing the thug to walk away without further confrontation. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. The thug understood that this was a gift, a chance to reflect, to change, and to grow. He took a deep breath, feeling both relief and gratitude. He had been humbled but not broken. He had been challenged but not defeated in a cruel sense. The encounter had opened a door in his mind, one that he had never considered before. As he walked away, the crowd began to resume their daily activities. Merchants rearranged their goods, children returned to their games, and townspeople continued their routines. But the memory of the encounter lingered, carried quietly in the minds of everyone who had watched. It was a lesson in humility, a demonstration of true strength, and a reminder that power was not just measured in muscle, but in wisdom, patience, and self-control. The thug's steps were slow, his mind busy with thoughts. He replayed the moment in his head, thinking about what he had learned and what it meant for his future. He realized that he had been reckless, relying on immediate force and intimidation to get what he wanted. Now he understood that there was a way to earn respect, to master oneself, and to grow stronger not just in body, but in mind and character. By the time he reached the edge of the crowd, he had made a silent promise to himself. He would not seek to dominate others recklessly. He would not rely solely on strength. Instead, he would observe, learn, and grow. The royal guard had shown him that true power was patient, steady, and wise. The thug felt a mix of emotions: shame for his previous arrogance, awe for the guard's calm authority, and hope for the possibility of becoming a better version of himself. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light over the streets of the kingdom. Life continued, busy and vibrant, yet the moment between the thug and the royal guard remained vivid in the minds of those who witnessed it. It was more than a lesson about strength. It was a lesson about life, respect, and the value of discipline. The thug walked on, changed in ways he could not yet fully understand, carrying with him the memory of the calm, unwavering presence of a man who had shown him the true meaning of strength. The thug walked slowly away from the crowd, his mind still racing with everything that had just happened. Each step felt heavier, not because of tired legs or sore muscles, but because of the weight of understanding that had settled on his shoulders. He had thought himself strong, invincible even, but the encounter with the royal guard had shattered that belief. And yet it was not a bitter feeling. It was a strange mixture of humility, curiosity, and a desire to learn more, a feeling that he had never experienced before. As he moved through the streets, the bustle of the morning began to return to normal. Merchants called out their prices, children laughed and ran in games of chase, and townspeople discussed their daily plans. Life had gone on, but for the thug, everything had changed. His mind replayed the calm, steady gaze of the royal guard, the firmness of his stance, and the quiet power he had witnessed. The thug realized that he had been measuring strength incorrectly all his life. Strength was not just in muscle or intimidation. It was in patience, control, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The people in the crowd began to disperse slowly, but many of them lingered, talking quietly about what they had seen. Some whispered to each other about how rare it was to witness a display of authority without aggression. Others marveled at the way the royal guard had remained calm, allowing the thug to struggle and learn the lesson without striking him. The story of the morning would not be forgotten. It would be told in hushed voices to children, friends, and visitors as a tale of strength, humility, and the importance of self-control. The thug's thoughts turned inward. He thought about all the times he had relied on his strength to get what he wanted. How many times had he bullied others or tried to show his power just to be admired? And now, for the first time, he understood that there was a better way. True respect was not something that could be forced. It had to be earned through skill, patience, and wisdom. He realized that he had wasted so many opportunities by trying to dominate others instead of learning from them. As he walked toward a quieter street, away from the bustling crowd, he reflected further. The royal guard had not only proven that strength alone was not enough, but he had also taught by example. There had been no anger, no humiliation, no unnecessary display of power. The guard had simply stood firm, calm, and in control. The thug realized that the guard's strength was quiet, almost invisible, but undeniable. It was a power that commanded respect without forcing it, a power that came from years of training, discipline, and self-awareness. The thug remembered how the crowd had reacted, how people had paused to watch and learn without speaking. He realized that respect worked in a similar way. It could not be demanded through threats or intimidation. People respected those who showed control, who were consistent in their actions, and who understood the value of patience and discipline. The thug had seen it firsthand, and the lesson had left a deep impression on him. As he continued walking, he found himself thinking about the future. He did not want to be remembered as someone who relied on brute force to get what he wanted. He wanted to become someone respected for more than just muscle. He thought about training, about learning control over his own body and mind, and about finding ways to use his strength wisely. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose, a goal beyond immediate power or fear. He wanted to grow stronger, not just in body, but in character. The thug's pace slowed as he reached a quiet corner of the city. He sat down on a low stone wall, letting his thoughts settle. He remembered the guard's calm voice, the firm stance, and the unshakable presence. Those images filled his mind, teaching him silently. He realized that the guard had not only proven his physical superiority, but had also shown him how to carry oneself with dignity, how to be confident without being reckless, and how to use strength wisely rather than carelessly. Time passed, and the sun rose higher in the sky, casting warm light over the streets. People moved around him, continuing their routines, but the thug remained still, deep in thought. He understood that change would not happen overnight. Learning patience and self-control, training the body and mind, and earning genuine respect would take time. But for the first time, he was willing to try. He was no longer interested in proving himself through quick displays of power. He wanted to grow, to learn, and to earn respect through effort, discipline, and wisdom. The thug stood and began to walk again, his steps more measured now. He noticed the small details of the streets he had passed without thought before, the way the sunlight hit the rooftops, the laughter of children playing games, the busy merchants calling out prices. Everything seemed clearer, sharper, and more meaningful. He felt connected to the city in a way he had never felt before. He realized that strength was not only about fighting or showing power, it was about understanding, observing, and living thoughtfully in the world around him. As he walked, he thought about the royal guard again. The guard had not been unkind, but he had not ignored the thug either. He had allowed the thug to learn through experience, showing that sometimes the best lessons come not from punishment, but from observation and reflection. The thug realized that he had been given a rare gift, the chance to see what true strength looked like, up close and without fear. He felt gratitude for the experience, knowing that it would guide him for the rest of his life. By the time the thug reached the edge of the city, he had made a quiet promise to himself. He would no longer seek to intimidate others for respect. He would no longer rely solely on brute strength. Instead, he would work on himself, training, learning, and growing. He would observe those who were wiser and more skilled, and he would learn from them. He would use his strength thoughtfully, not recklessly, and he would earn respect rather than demand it. The streets were still busy, but the thug walked with a new sense of purpose. He noticed the people around him, not as obstacles or rivals, but as fellow citizens, each with their own lives, strengths, and challenges. He realized that part of true strength was understanding others, showing respect, and acting with wisdom. The memory of the royal guard's calm authority stayed with him, guiding his thoughts and actions. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets, the thug found a quiet place to rest for a moment. He sat on a bench near a fountain, watching the water ripple gently. He thought about the lessons of the day, the value of patience, the importance of discipline, and the power of humility. He knew that he had been humbled but not broken. Instead, he felt stronger in a way he had never felt before, stronger in mind, in character, and in understanding. The crowd that had gathered earlier had long since dispersed, returning to their daily lives, but the story of what had happened would not be forgotten. People would talk about the thug who had tried to challenge a royal guard and learned the true meaning of strength. They would tell children about the quiet authority of the guard and the lesson that strength without control was incomplete. And the thug himself would carry the memory as a reminder of the path he wanted to follow, a path of growth, respect, and thoughtful action. As evening approached, the thug walked back toward the heart of the city. He felt a sense of peace, mixed with determination. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Learning control, patience, and wisdom would take time and effort, but he was ready. For the first time, he saw that true strength was not about immediate power or fear. It was about understanding oneself, learning from others, and earning respect through action and discipline. The sun set over the city, painting the streets with a golden glow. People returned home, finishing their work, and the city began to settle into the quiet of the evening. The thug, walking along the cobbled streets, carried with him a sense of purpose and a quiet confidence. He knew that the encounter with the royal guard had changed him forever. He had learned a lesson that could not be taken away, a lesson in humility, strength, and respect. By the time he reached the edge of the city, the thug paused and looked back. The palace loomed in the distance, silent and grand, a reminder of the day's events. He smiled faintly to himself, feeling gratitude for the experience. He knew that he had begun a journey, not just of physical strength, but of character, wisdom, and understanding. And with each step he took away from the crowd, he felt lighter, wiser, and ready to face the world in a new way. That evening, as the city settled into quiet, the thug found a place to sit and reflect on everything that had happened. He realized that true strength was not about proving oneself to others, but about understanding one's own limits, learning from those who were wiser, and acting with patience and discipline. The royal guard had taught him without striking, without anger, and without humiliation. He had shown that real power came from control, patience, and wisdom. And so, the thug's journey began. He had been humbled, challenged, and awakened to a new understanding of the world. He would carry the lessons of that day with him always, striving to grow stronger, wiser, and more respectful in every action. The city continued its quiet rhythm, unaware of the small but meaningful change in one of its residents. But for the thug, the encounter with the royal guard had become a turning point, a moment that would guide his life for years to come.